Protestant missions took a lot longer to join the Roman Catholics. The reason is quite simple. Roman Catholicism, by the 16th century, had already formulated itself for a number of centuries and was in a position where it could extend its tentacles. The Protestants were still finding their feet. They were still in reaction mode. They were still in, let's establish ourselves, which does make sense. I remember, when I was mentioning that we planted about 40 churches as a local congregation, it might sound like, wow, you have a very zealous congregation. But when we started, the very first time we went to our members, we're Baptists, we have to get a vote. When we went to our members and said to them, there is a church that is about to close down. We want to help them so that they can get revitalized and go forward. And then there is a residential area where two couples had come to us to say, can you come and establish the church here? So we're saying to the church, as leaders, we are convinced this is what God wants us to do. Let's go. It was an impossible task. The members of the church said, no, we can't. And they were giving reasons. We don't have the money, number one. Two, we are still meeting in a rented community hall. That's not much to be said for that. In other words, we still need the money. The house I was living in, we were still renting that house. And in those days in Zambia, you paid, when you were renting, you paid 1 year in advance. I don't know what it is like here. So we used to borrow money in order to pay off the landlord. And then half the year, we're trying to come back out of the red, and then start accumulating the money in order to pay. And the hole was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they were saying, look at the figures. Come on, you guys, what's your problem? We can't do this. And then at that time, the only two of us were elders, myself and another brother. And they were saying, look, we can't spare you. There's just two of you here. So to start saying, now let's support there, it won't work. And we just had to keep saying, brethren, the Great Commission has no if clauses. You know that, eh? Doesn't say, go and make disciples of all nations if you've got a church building, if you've got a fat bank account, if you've got many leaders. There's no if clause there. It is, all authority has been given to me, go. So not to go is to be disobedient. So finally, the member said, okay, you are our leaders, we'll trust you, we will proceed. That's how we first did it. So we need to be sympathetic to the fact that for the first 200 years or so, there was hardly any missions work from the Protestants coming into Africa because of the fact that it was still largely new. However, they began. The Dutch and the English would have been among the very first that came in, and they came into West Africa. We will come back to that. Maybe let's go to that diagram, the map. Okay? So they came into West Africa to do their missions work there. Largely, it was not so much the effort of reaching the common people, the people in West Africa, the Africans themselves. Most of them were chaplains and pastors who came to look after the interest of the traders, their own Dutch and English traders who had established themselves in the area and needed spiritual ministry, spiritual nourishment. So they were the primary goal of the missions work at that time. There were efforts also to reach the people in the area, but it proved extremely difficult because of, first of all, the lives of the Europeans who were there. Okay, because the understanding of the local people was that they did not separate the missionary from the trader. Okay, they were all the same skin color. They all came from the same place. Surely, if their Christianity is correct, their behavior should be better than this. And so the traders gave a bad name to Christianity. After all, it wasn't just the pastors and missionaries in that sense, but a number of them who were claiming to be Christians too, and would be attending the places of worship where these chaplains and pastors were carrying out their trade. So the Africans themselves were put off and did not want to have anything to do with the religion of the Christianity, the Protestants. Further down in the Cape of Good Hope, there was another effort to establish missions work. And it was primarily, first of all, the Dutch who got there. And their efforts, basically the same thing. They found it difficult because the traders had a bad reputation with the people that were found there. And then they didn't just, at least in the Cape here, because of the climate, which was very much like the climate in Europe, they also wanted to develop farming because they knew that the same citrus plants that they had up in the north, grapes as well, could actually grow very well in the area, and therefore, with cheaper labor and so forth, they'll be able to get a harvest that they would then sell up in the north. Okay, so that's something else that they wanted to do as the Dutch people. However, same thing. They brought in pastors, they brought in chaplains to look after the interests of their own people rather than primarily evangelizing the locals. They tried to do that, but it was not gaining traction in the ground. The next major effort is with what are called the Moravian Brethren, who moved into Germany, and they sent missionaries to America and also missionaries to Africa. Does anybody remember or does anybody know about the conversion of the Wesley brothers? Yeah. So it was these missionaries that the Moravians sent over to America that John Wesley traveled with. And as he saw their joy, their peace in the midst of the storms at sea, it made him conclude, if this is Christianity, I'm not a Christian. And he wrote afterwards that he went to America to convert the heathen. He came back converted himself because of what he experienced. The Moravian Brethren, with all their simplicity, they had a real passion for evangelism. And because of the real passion that they had for evangelism, they then sent missionaries to Africa. One of their very first missionaries was a guy called George Schmidt. He came to the Cape of Good Hope there and basically began to reach out to the Hottentots. And it was a Dutch-controlled area at that stage, but he wasn't primarily interested in reaching the Dutch or the traders. It was primarily the heathen. That's what the task was all about. And he specifically, as I said, chose the Hottentots. Learning their language was very difficult, primarily because of the cliques. You've heard those cliques that are in their languages, which even me up to now I can't attempt. So it was very difficult to reach out to them. But over a period of about 5 years, he managed to win a lot of converts from among the Hottentots. However, because he himself was not an ordained minister, he then went back to be ordained so that he could baptize them. So he was finally ordained, and he came and now baptized many converts. It was primarily this baptism that now got the attention of the Dutch and the Dutch government. Here was now somebody who was not part of them because he was from Germany, who was now having this success in their territory. And that's how they then kicked him out of the area. And he went further north. So it wasn't that he left Africa completely. He continued his work, but he left that area. The next major Protestant effort to reach out to this area is from a society, a missionary society that is called the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. And that's again back into West Africa. And the main first missionary there in 1751 was a gentleman called Thomas Thompson. And he came into the Gold Coast, which is right at the bottom there, and now seeking to reach out into that area. And exactly the same problem that the Dutch and English found somewhere in the Senegal area there, and that was the bad testimony of the Europeans, the traders primarily. That made it almost impossible to reach the local people. But Thomas came up with a brilliant idea. And what he did is, as he was seeking to reach out to the people, he chose 3 of them who were outstanding. They were brilliant young men, Africans, converted to Christ. And what he did is he took them back with them. He took them back with him to England. And there trained them for pastoral ministry. Sadly, 2 of them died while there. But one of them, by the name of Philip KQ, survived and then came back to the Gold Coast and became a missionary to his own people and made some level of success, which now takes me back to our slide here. Yeah. So that's the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in West Africa. The main thing that I want to bring out as we draw towards the end, and I'm going to read quite a bit from this book, was that last statement. All these were not very fruitful. All these were not very fruitful. I've already betrayed myself, but in case, just in case one of you caught it, what is it that made this very difficult? I've said it a number of times already. Yes. That was one of the major difficulties. And again, it's, you can't say, yeah, but that one is not a real Christian, I'm the real Christian. You can't speak like that when you're reaching out to people. They identify you often by your genealogy, where you are coming from. So you are all the same people. I don't know how it is here in Ethiopia, but where I come from in Zambia, we have the phrase is caricatures, where certain people, you treat them the same. So Indians would normally be seen as traders. That's what they do. And they're traders that never trust you. So they don't start a business and leave you to run it while they are at headquarters. No, they actually sit and the money bag is in front of them. As there's buying and selling, and all the wealth is in the family. You are employees, and that's it. It's very difficult for one who is not among them, or who's Indian, or in fact, they like saying, actually, these are Pakistanis, they're not Indians. They try to show the difference. But for us, they're all Indians, is what I mean. The difference is yours. For us looking in, you are all Indians. So we tend to bunch them together. The same thing with tribes. When someone wants to marry, parents normally say, the parents of the girl, they say, what tribe is he? That's assuming the girl mentioned the first name and it's an English name. So they want the surname so they can know what tribe. And the moment they know it's a particular tribe, they'll say, oh, no. Those are bad people. Those are bad people. You don't get married there, and so forth. So again, it's the tribe. Some people there have gained a bad name, and so everybody is thrown into the mix. Yesterday, we were speaking about Nigerians, exactly the same thing. They are good Nigerians. Trust me, they are there. But again, it's others give the nation a bad name. I've never forgotten, at one time, an uncle of mine, I hope I don't stray, I've only got into ministry now. An uncle of mine, his daughter was getting married to a Nigerian. And because of the respect they have for me in the wider family, he called me to his home. So I was sitting there, and he says, well, your cousin, there's a gentleman who wants to marry her. And I noticed he was hesitant. Then finally he goes, the gentleman is Nigerian. But he's a good Nigerian, this one. Yeah. So it's basically the same thing. Okay, the people get a bad reputation, and everybody's thrown into the mix. Although this particular one, my uncle has since blushed about it, because before the wedding, he soon discovered his daughter was pregnant. So obviously, that was already bad news. The two of them were in America. A few years down the line, the guy was arrested by the cops in America, thrown into the cells for fraud. And then my cousin escaped just in time with her daughter to come to Zambia, just in time. The police were now saying, accomplice, you must have known, and so forth. So she escaped just in time. So then the time he came out of prison, he visited our country and then made his way to Nigeria, and then never said anything ever again about his wife or daughter, zero. And so my uncle tried, visited Nigeria, met with the in-laws and tried to say, oh, you know, you've got your daughter-in-law in my home back in Zambia, and so on. And they said, yeah, we'll talk to the young man, And then, yeah, nothing ever happened since then. So he's now quite embarrassed about saying, but no, this one is a good Nigerian. This one is a good Nigerian. Okay, all that to say, yes, others cannot separate the good, the bad, and the ugly from among you. They just see you together as one bad bunch. That's one reason. The other reason why missions proved very, very difficult for the missionaries at this stage was the slave trade that was now a major industry on the African continent. So those places that, these places where the mission stations had become like the outlets to the sea for the slaves that were being ambushed, captured, and brought out to be sold. So the peoples themselves were very uneasy about anybody coming among them, whether it's another tribe or whether it was Arabs or whether it was Caucasians. They were just very uneasy. And so building relationships were proving extremely difficult. And so missions work suffered a lot. I'm trying to see where I can pick up a bit of the reading. I do want to deal with it as the slave trade itself, but I just need to be careful because my next slide, as you can see, is on the slave trade. Maybe let me hang on to it so that I come and deal with it in its fullness after lunch. So that will give us roughly an hour and 15 minutes instead of just an hour. But maybe before we break up, I know now that I've given myself away, you might want to say you've got no questions or no comments. I'm really concerned about the reason that Brian gave. And I think it's important for us to process this because it's a real hindrance to evangelism and missions work. This issue of our testimonies. It's not just missions, it's evangelism. If you have a bad name for Christianity, it tends to undermine the work that we are doing to reach the people. And this failure to separate the good and the bad. I mean, I don't know how it is here in Ethiopia, but in Zambia, if anybody in public calls me and they call me Pastor Mbewe, I want to sink into the ground The reason is because people turn around and they start looking. And you can literally read what they are saying as they are looking. They are saying, so these are the guys who are defrauding people of their money. Because they can't separate the prosperity gospel preacher from us innocent guys. Because the main thing they see on TV is these same guys. Because us, we don't have the money to have TV programs. The billboards around town, it's them. With their miracle crusades and deliverances and so on, it's them. So the moment you are in the post office and somebody just says, "Hey, Pastor Mbewe," everybody turns out. That's our money. That is good. And it proves difficult to reach out. Any comments, any questions there about this matter? Because it hindered Protestant missions coming into Africa. It still hinders us today. Yeah, so it's a real challenge. Even before we get to the slave trade, it's a real challenge that we need to face.